because there are a couple people that were not able to be here today, but wanted to make sure that they didn't miss what David had to say. So I'm going to open it up by asking David a couple of questions and we'll take it from here. So David, would those people who knew you as either a child or maybe in your formative years have thought to themselves, you would be doing what you do as a copywriter?
Yeah, I think that if they knew what a copywriter was or such a thing as a copywriter, they would probably say, yeah, that's perfect for David. He gets to, convince people of things, right? So it's kind of, I guess that's always been something that I've had is I thought I was going to be a lawyer for a long time because, I thought, well, that's cool. You get to argue for a living. You get to, I was on the debate team in high school. I liked advocating for a position and I liked, because I also, a lot of that is learning, you learn a lot about what other people think when you debate them, right? I always like to talk to people that disagree with me. It's much more interesting than someone they got all the same opinions. It doesn't matter. So they probably would have said, yes, that would be perfect for David to write copy like that and convince people of things and, use his imagination.
I love that. I like that you said that you like to talk to people who disagree with you. That's such a unique perspective to have. But
Well,
I would never think of you as, go ahead.
You have opinions like I do that that's most people will disagreeing with them.
Well, I would never think of you as argumentative or combative. So I think that that's just a very unique way of saying that you enjoy the persuasive technique. So I love that. I'm going to use that. Well, David, would you let us know a little bit about how you became a copywriter and how you got into this? You said you thought maybe you'd be a lawyer, but is there anything specific that kind of led you from that direction to where you ended up?
I kind of fell into it, in a good way. I was doing some teaching jobs and I needed some money. So I got a job. I'm a really good typist. I got a job at a place called Ogilvy and Mather. And they were like, oh, it's a big ad agency. I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. It never occurred to me that I would actually do anything other than, word processing type stuff for them. And so working there, I figured, well, maybe I could try my hand at writing some stuff. So talked to some of the creative people there and started doing a little bit and gradually got into being a copywriter there. So it was really, of course, a great place to be a copywriter because it's kind of like a teaching hospital. It's very, like an Agora in a way, the training, the ongoing training that they have, the legacy of David Ogilvy and all his teachings. And it's, of course,
go ahead.
I think it's a great opportunity. In a way, it's kind of like working at Agora where you're around all this, people doing a lot of, things that you can learn from and people to learn from.
That's awesome. And being exposed to such sharp people in that industry, like you said, even like we are here in the Agora world, I think is incredibly valuable. It is an education, informal education, if you will, that a lot of people don't get. And I think that's one of the things that attracts people to our company in particular. I can imagine was obviously incredibly valuable to you at Ogilvy and Mather. In light of not being in a context like that now, how do you continue to stay sharp? And obviously with your coaching, I'm going to guess that that's something that keeps you sharp as you're identifying ways to mentor and coach other people. But are there specific things that you currently do now that keep your skills sharp and developing as you continue to be a copywriter and in your coaching?
I think just studying what's going on and studying what's going on, not just in our own world, which, we all do, right? We keep track of promotions from, Stansberry and from, other publishing companies, but also in the whole world of advertising. Even I still subscribe to Ad Age. I still subscribe to a service where you get television commercials. I'm learning about e-commerce now, which, where you learn techniques and you learn ways of thinking and you learn ways of marketing and you learn ways of expressing things, as a writer, which I guess is what we're talking about, which, you can use in your writing for whatever you write. So I think it's just, I've always sort of added, like, not just studying copywriting, but studying like how do lawyers convince a jury? There's a lot to be learned from that, of how lawyers write briefs. That's largely what we do. They write a brief to convince a judge to change the venue, to do some action. We're trying to get people to change how they do an action. And lawyers have to be very specific, very, proof oriented. They have to bring in past, case law in a certain way. They can't be too pushy, telling the judge, hey, you're an idiot. This has been, proven in the past. What's wrong with you? They have to be very nice and very complimentary and very persuasive. So, because I think a lot of copywriting, maybe that's a mistake I see a lot of people making. They keep trying to learn how to copyright better, right? And that only takes you so far, as opposed to learning how to write better, learning how to persuade better, learning how to generate ideas better. The copywriting really is a simple, relatively simple thing. There are certain techniques, there are certain formulas, there are certain ways of doing things. And people kind of get good at that, but they don't have that, underlying foundation of being really good writers and persuaders that the top writers have. Because I think that's what differentiates the top writers. It's not so much they know more about copywriting and they know more techniques and they know more formulas, but they're just, better persuaders. I mean, if you meet people like, like Clayton when he was alive, or Gary Halbert, or, they were great persuaders, right? Bill is a great persuader, right? Mark, the people that we have within Agora that are great writers, I think you could see are kind of the people who can be very persuasive around an idea.
As you're talking about the big idea and then the persuasion that's needed, all of that being done through copywriting being the technical aspect of it, can you talk a little bit about the idea process? And is there anything that you use to help generate these ideas that you can then start to use these persuasive techniques that you're studying and learning more about and constantly trying to apply?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I actually, I did a course. I have a course actually on, it's called Think Inside the Box, where I talk about using triggers to kind of generate ideas. One of the most common ones that a lot of people know is like doing the opposite of something. So instead of like how to make money in the stock market, it becomes how to lose money in the stock market. But there's a bunch of things like that where you look at something and you say, well, how can I divide this up in a certain way so it becomes more, how can I take one aspect of it and pull it out? How can I make this a better idea? How can I sharpen this by subtracting something from it? How can I add something, from the senses to it? Because I think a lot of ideas, if you listen to someone like Jay Abraham, right, how he thinks, he really generates ideas by asking himself questions, right? So it's like he's got a whole, I mean, I think he does, it's probably automatic by this point, right? He doesn't need the list, but he's kind of got a list, right? How can I optimize what they're doing now? What have they done in the past that they're not doing that I can recommend that they do? Do they have a list? Are they optimizing the list? Do they have competitors? Do the competitors get leads that the competitors can't fulfill because maybe the competitors are too expensive and you're the cheaper brand, right? So maybe we can buy their leads for the people that think it's too expensive, right? So he's kind of got this, clicks on the dial, Gary Halbert used to call it, right? Of this question. And it's the same thing with ideas, right? There's not but so many things you can do with an idea, and within our world, right? Can I do this from a fear angle? Can I do this? Can I flip this to a greed angle? Can I add current events into this somehow?
That's
So
awesome.
just making it more systematic.
I do want to mention, and I apologize for not mentioning this before, if anyone has any questions for David, please feel free to jump in, especially now that he's shared a little bit. Love to, have you kind of get something personally that from his wisdom as well. So if anybody has any questions, no need to raise your hand, feel free to jump in. It's Zoom, I get it. It might be a little awkward and we can talk over each other, but we'll get there. So, okay, so David, or actually, does anybody have any questions at this point?
I was going to say, I don't know about wisdom, but, doing the wrong thing enough times to learn, a little better what the right thing is, I think is, I mean, it's a joke in a way, but it's like really true, right? The stuff that I've really learned from has been kind of post-morteming a promo that didn't do well and seeing, oh, I see what I didn't do. I forgot about this aspect of it, right? I forgot about, emotion, right? I never really got emotion going in this, or it's just too complex of an idea.
Actually, I do have one question, David. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have one question. It's a question I keep asking a lot because this thing about, and I completely agree with you about when you say we have to improve the art of writing. We don't really do that. And the more I look at some of the promos, I feel that the promos that are not really written well, but have used the techniques of copywriting, and I'm glad you made that huge distinction between writing and copywriting, right? But the promos that use the techniques of copywriting, the hard selling, the crass hard selling absolutely works. Whereas the really well-written copy doesn't seem to get the numbers. And since we are in the numbers game, and over the last 3 years, I used to really scorn and laugh at the kind of copy Agora and Sal and all that. But now I've learned that that is the way that really works. That is the way that seems to get the numbers. As David Ogilvy himself rightly said, you have to get the cash register ringing.
Right.
So the cash register ringing, the whole thing seems to become, the good copy is not getting those cash registers ringing. It is the hard sell, that.
Sure, but it depends on what
you say it.
It depends on what you mean by good, right? I don't mean good so much in the sense of, oh, fine writing, good writing, so much as, if those techniques are going to be used, the copywriting techniques, that it not be boring, that it not be confusing, that it not be hard to grasp. Good writing in that sense, with active verbs that are interesting, that the writing is simple and clear. And that makes the writing techniques, the copywriting techniques work all the better. Although, of course, now we're kind of limited to a lot of those copywriting techniques that we can use. We can't use the hype so much. We can't use the things that we're used to using.
That was a question that I was going to pose to you, David, because you and I are seeing the industry in the same way. I personally have always struggled with making too many demands of my readers on the writing side. Sometimes it has worked, sometimes it has not. I sometimes struggle to write the hard sell copy, and now the pendulum is swinging back to a place where it seems like copywriters are going to be forced into finding new, perhaps more creative, perhaps even higher bar, higher minded ways of selling. Mm-hmm. And Mohan's question of whether we can make that the same level of success as the more lizard brain, more hard sell, fastball type copy remains to be seen. What are your thoughts on that? I think people that have those base skills you're talking about, thinking, writing, structure, whatnot, will have an advantage. But I don't know. What are your thoughts?
To me, it's kind of, how many arrows you have in your quiver in a way. How many, do you have the flexibility to go from hype to not hype, to a little more hype, to somewhere in the middle? You know what I mean? Do you have that control? I think is so essential. Do you know what it is that makes something be more hypey or less hypey? Do you know how to hype without it seeming like it's hype? Right?
Incredibly, yeah.
And I think that's going to become increasingly important, you know, and things like trust are going to become increasingly important, right? Because if I trust somebody and he says, I'll give you, you know, if you give me $100, I'll give you $110, you know, like if I trust him, I'll do it. If I don't trust him, I won't do it, right? No matter how he hypes it. Even if he says, give me $100, I'll give you $300. I'm not going to do it. I don't trust him. I don't know if it's going to be counterfeit money. I don't know if he's really going to give it to me. And it's the same thing. You see people buy, you know, like if you watch the Gundry stuff for Golden Hippo, right? You know, Gundry is just so trustworthy. He just lays down this foundation of trust that it builds on, that he doesn't have to then hype, because you just want to buy whatever he's saying. You know, you trust this guy.
So yeah, tools in the toolbox, arrows in the quiver. You know, if lacking the ability to overpromise or be especially hypey to go after a prospect in one strata of the prospect pool, we need to be able to shift gears toward people who might be more receptive to things like trust and credibility and whatnot. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, and sometimes even shifting gears within a promo. It's very powerful if your promo is kind of hypey and then all of a sudden it's not.
Right, you downshift into a lower credibility gear and go up that proof hill. Yeah, I agree with you, because I think what you're saying in a way, David, is anything you can do to. One of the things I like to talk about when I talk about copy is defying classification. Our natural tendency under the categorical imperative is to try to put something in a box so that we can classify it and not really think about it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
If you can sense in your copy when that's starting to happen in your prospect, and then shift gears entirely to defy that classification and demand evaluation under another potential classification, if you can keep doing that, all of a sudden you've sustained your prospect for 10, 15 minutes. They don't know how to classify this. And they've, you know, all of a sudden they're engaged. They've got time in. You've broken down their barriers. They've been unable to classify you, and you've probably reached them on multiple levels. I think that's where you're part of what you're speaking to, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing more powerful than just when someone is starting to feel, boy, this is awfully hypey. I'm kind of skeptical about this. You downshift, as you said so eloquently.
Because they're starting to put it in a box.
Yeah.
Right? They're starting to, this is a bunch of hype. Oh, wait a minute. That's not hype. That I didn't think about that. Now I gotta reclassify this.
Right.
And then if the next,
And that lack of predictability is important too, because it keeps the prospect on their toes. It makes it more interesting. It's like you can't predict what's coming next. He's shifting it up on me, and that's much more interesting.
David, do you think that this idea of emphasizing trust, do you feel like that's something that's changed, or that's something that just has always been important in the market, or do you feel like it's something that's cyclical, like we get into a certain kind of climate and it becomes more important or less important? And part of the reason I ask is because, so when Mohan says that he sees the stuff that rings the cash register, having now done this, I haven't done this as long as you have, but I started in 1992, I think. Mm-hmm. And the markets, when they go up, the kind of stuff that's hypey and everything is what works. And it's hard to beat that because that's just the way everybody's talking, and that's what they're looking for. But then it does seem to change, and it seems to change when there's a downturn. Now internally we have pressure for change. Mm-hmm. So it's that's unusual for us, I think, for Agora. but I can't, so when somebody who hasn't been writing copy as long is using the recent references as a model, that seems to make sense as a way to do it, rather than looking back at what used to work. But on the other hand, I think back, for instance, over the history of Agora, and the biggest hits that Agora have had, Plague of the Black Debt, the End of America, and then several others strewn in between.
Mhm.
They've had exactly that quality of persuasion without feeling like you're being persuaded.
Yep.
Conversational, trust-based language. I think somebody who's especially good at it is Mike Palmer.
Mhm.
But there are many others, but he's one that comes to mind, and he was, of course, involved with End of America. Just very conversational, and you feel like you have that sensation of when you read it, not like this is good copy, but like, hey, this is a good idea. Like, I want to get involved in this. So I don't know. I think I lost my original question in there, but how you feel about that trust-based selling? Is it a permanent thing or a perennial thing?
Well, I think it's both. I mean, I hate to be, it's trying not to be a cop out about it, but sure, there's a cyclicalness of desire for trust. But you're right. When you look back, you see those promos that come along every once in a while. I don't know exactly when they came and how that fits in with the cyclicalness of trust, but they work because they're just so disarmingly trustworthy, unhypey. You would show it to your mother, kind of a promotion. Right. And I think it's something to study now. How does he do that? I mean, that's what I love about writing in a way. It's not like painting where you look at a painting and you go, my God, how did he do that? Right. You can't see how they lay down the brush strokes. You can't see how they mix the colors. But when you look at writing, the words are there for us to study, to take apart. Right. Like how does he create, so much trust in that first sentence? Where he just disarmingly says, hey, we've made some predictions and a lot of them have come true, in a very kind of disarming way, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of there for us to study. And I feel like we need that now to be, that arrow in our quiver more than ever, to be able to do that.
Nice.
That's a great analogy. I love that. Anybody else have any questions for David? Only because we only have about 4 minutes left, and I know we have a hard stop at 10:30 today.
I don't have a question, but I have a very interesting anecdote. So if anybody doesn't have a question, I'll share my anecdote.
Go right ahead.
So like David, I have an advertising background. But never worked with Ogilvy and Mather. I worked with JWT and Saatchi and DDB. But I must tell you, all this was back home in India, and you might be familiar with the word "om," which is the intonation that Hindus use to evoke a higher spirit, right? For meditation, they use the word "om," and it's a very deep thing. We had an insider joke in our advertising agencies among all the copywriters. We used to say "om" to invoke Ogilvy and Mather. O-N-M. For that was the OM for us. So when David says, oh, I worked in an ad agency, you guys don't know what a great ad agency he worked for. That is absolutely the pinnacle of advertising. That's where he comes from.
Hey, I have a question
That's
for
good.
David.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think that this call would be a missed opportunity, David, if you did not have a chance to talk about bullets and fascinations.
Okay.
So you have a whole spiel, I know for a fact. And so I would love it if you shared some of the highlight reel of that spiel.
Yeah. I mean, to me, bullets are really interesting because they're kind of a microcosm of copywriting. Everything that copy needs to be, right? Curiosity, interesting, relevant to someone's life, benefit, uniqueness, right? Goes into crafting a bullet. And bullets don't have to be bullets. They can actually be copywriting, right? You could say what never to eat on an airplane, or you could write like a whole paragraph about how, did you know that there's one thing that you should never eat on an airplane? It's true. This thing can blah, blah, blah. So you kind of expand it a little bit, but it's still kind of a bullet based thing. But what I love about them is it's so easy to look at them and see, is it working? Do you feel yourself kind of drawn to it? Do you feel yourself wanting to know the answer to it or not? And to then see, what are the things I need to add to it, right? Why is it not doing that? Oh, because it doesn't seem very unique. It seems like something I already know. Okay, so now maybe I have to hide a little bit of that to make it not seem so familiar, right? Maybe I have to, come into it from a different angle. So the first thing someone thinks is, oh, that's gold. I know what that is. I know what he's talking about. Whether it is gold or not, you don't want them thinking, I know what the answer to that is. And, it's the same thing in copy. You don't want them going along going, yeah, I know this stuff, right? It's got to be eye-opening. It's got to be new. So, you start with, the AWAI has the 4 U's, which are a great place to start with bullets, which is is it unique? Is it useful? Is it ultra specific? And is it urgent? Which of course is great for copy too, right? You want copy to be all those things. Is that kind of a little bit of a starter primer? I could go for hours on, as I have on bullets. And
yes, that was a great little teaser. Seriously, anybody on this call who has not heard David's spiel about bullets is a lesser copywriter for it. So there you go.
Well, thank you for that, Sean.
Yeah, thank you.
Perhaps we can find that particular resource, and I can pass it around to the group, especially, although I can't recommend everything that I've been consuming from David's resources highly enough to you all. So like I said, we're so honored that we get to have him on these calls. I hope you know now that maybe you could take a little more advantage of picking his brain here and there in an unofficial context. I'm going to go ahead and close out this call for today, just because, like I said, we have a hard stop here at 10:30. But David, thank you again for being willing to kick off our guest spotlight series. And it was fantastic talking with you and just getting a little bit more of a deeper dive into how you've done things and where you've come from. Anything else that you want to say before we close out here?
One thing that I didn't get to mention that I think is the most important thing is especially with younger writers, is not saying things in copy that you wouldn't say to someone in person. Like if they would only look at their copy in that way, right? Would I say this to someone?
As dialogue.
Yeah, kind of dialogue, but even like, would I even make this promise to someone? Would it be believable? Is this the way I would try to get them interested? If I was with someone in a bar and I wanted to get them interested in, I don't know, apple pie or whatever it is, right? Is my first paragraph the thing that I would say to that person?
Yeah. Or that you would be receptive to yourself. I always think, would I bite on this if somebody said this to me? That's same thing, just the other angle.
It is, yeah. It is the same thing. But the reverse of it is, would I say this? Would I feel comfortable saying this to someone? Because, sometimes, I think that and I read what I wrote and I cringe like, oh my God, I wouldn't say that. And, I think sometimes good copywriting is just the ability to keep crossing things out until you come to what is good copywriting and being ruthless about that. When I worked with Jim Punkery, he would throw out whole first drafts of things and just start over. And his writing was the better for it. And he was right. You need to start again. You can't, cut and paste and fix things up. Try a different direction, see if it works.
That is the wisdom that I was talking about. I literally have tears welling up in my eyes, David. I love that. What you just said, it obviously applies incredibly to everyone in this group here, but it applies to all of our lives going forward. So I love that nugget of wisdom that you just shared with us can be applied completely professionally, but I hope you'll all take it and apply it as we go forth from this call, from this room today, all the interactions that we have with the people that we're blessed to come in contact with. So everybody, thank you for being here. Thanks for taking time. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you when you see you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
Lydia.
you, everybody. Thanks for doing this, Lydia.
All right.
Thanks
Bye,
again,
guys.
David. All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.